Welcome to the 17th video in the Just In Case series, sponsored by Quality and Equality, an organization development consultancy firm based in Oxford, United Kingdom. And my name is Marianne Rainey. I'm the founder and the director of the firm. This series is called Just In Case. It's just in case you need reminding of something, just in case you didn't know something you want to learn, just in case you want to refresh your memory, or just in case you want to know a topic better. But today, the just in case is you want to eavesdrop about the conversation from a pioneer in the field of OD, and his name need no introduction, Peter Block. Peter's book, Flawless Consulting, continue to be a cornerstone of wisdom for so many of us practitioners. He's a prolific writer. He has other books that really worth reading. Not just worth, it's important for us to read, like Stewardship, The Answer to How is Yes, The Abundant Community, and then another book called An Other Kingdom. He's the founder of the Common Good Collective and part of the Economics of Compassion Initiative of Greater Cincinnati, and a member of the local neighborhood council. And he serves on the board called LivePerson, a provider of online engagement solution. His work is in the restoration of the common good and creating the world that reclaim our humanity from the onslaught of modernism. And so why he is so impressive intellectually and also by his extensive trade knowledge, what touches many of our heart is his commitment to community and to bring humanizing back to the workplace. And so today it is incredible to have him share his insights with Dr. Marianne Rainey, who is a great colleague of mine. Marianne will be making a video on her own, but just want to tell you that she is a co-chair of the International Gestalt Organization and Leadership Development, and regularly teaches leadership and management in many universities like Yale, Case Western, Benedictine, and also Loyola. So sit back and enjoy this amazing conversation between the two of them. And also make sure you have your notebook with you, because when I watch this video 3 times, every time I get more insightful quotes or evocative statement. And so I hope you share the similar experience. Enjoy.
Thank you, Marianne. And thank you, Peter Block. I'm Marianne Rainey, and I will be here in the role of facilitating a discussion between Peter Block and me. The way I got to be in this is that I have worked with Marianne in the U.S. OD program and also in the Singapore OD program. And I've done work with her numerous times in Singapore. And it's always a pleasure to collaborate with Marianne. She's always forward thinking. And I'm looking forward to this time today with Peter.
Thank you. And hi, this is Peter Block. I'm honored to be here. I'm way past my prime. So the fact that you would come to this and Marianne would care about anything I say is a miracle. So thank you very much.
Yes. One of the things I think might support our being useful to the audience is to provide some context, Peter. And I thought about the state, especially of organization development, which we will refer to as OD in short form for this video. And I've been thinking prior to the current time, things that come to mind for me would be large system interventions, what's going on in that arena with the container of what we're calling dialogic OD. We're still working and attending to chaos and change with perspectives coming from different disciplines. We're still looking at this, for business purposes, agility came into play and agile processes. And then there's also design thinking, which emphasizes looking at what the end user wants and desires, trying to manage our assumptions about that. But those are the things that come to mind for me. Now, of course, currently, we're working in virtual space. We've moved from mobile to virtual space. And of course, the whole diversity, equity, inclusion, and a word that you love to use, and I love when you use it, belonging, have come front and center. So I'm going to stop there and get a reaction from you.
Well, thank you. You know, from day one, we've all had our own sense of what is OD. And it's nice to hear that it's systemic. It has to do with transformation in some form. It has to do with the chaos theory just got a big boost because there's no longer a theory. And something fundamental has changed in the world.
Yes.
I think my intention is to try to say, so why OD now? Why is it relevant now? And why does the world need this now? And I feel it's a unique moment, and something more is required of us than we imagined. And that's what I try to just play with. Nothing too thought through. But I think it's a chance for my sense of why I've been interested in this long. Is I always had a sense that to care about humanizing systems is worth doing. Now, how we express that and package it changed in time. You know, when I started, the managerial grid was hot stuff. Yeah. And I can't even remember it. When I started, our big innovation was to go from sensitivity training, which was my beginning in this field, which was wonderful because you just sat around and stared at each other for as long as you could stand it. And eventually somebody would say something meaningful. And then we cared about teams. But to me, it's a long-term project to care about organizations. We all could have been therapists, but we chose not to. And so we care about organized effort and how do we make it work and be human at the same time. And that's what I think is unique, because I think it's been a struggle to make it human. We had a social contract before, which basically said, if I go to work and am compliant and make eye contact, do the right thing, you'll take care of me. You'll provide me a future. And that was kind of the deal. Now that contract's been broken for a long time, but we didn't know it until the pandemic, until this protest. But we thought it would be fine. And we thought we had to go to work, you know, and where are you going to live? Well, how long is the commute? Was our first question. I took a job with SO Research and Engineering, you know, and I saw if that's where I'm working, okay, let me look for a place to live that's reasonable, that I can afford. And so we have a whole association with going to work. That's blown up now. That's gone. This is no time to be buying office buildings.
No.
And so something's changed in the social contract that exists in workplace cultures. And that's where we have an opportunity, by our knowledge of systems, by our knowledge of how to bring people together, to renegotiate that contract. And it's going to be a step. The pandemic made visible what we knew was true. People say, let's go back to the normal. The normal was a word you used to describe disappointment, to live with. Nobody ever experienced happiness and says, oh, is this the new normal? No, the new normal is experiencing, you know, flatter, less work, less rights, Distributed workplace is a nice way of saying it. And so there's no normal around anymore. So I think OD, because we know how to bring people together and we know how to think holistically, has a shot in renegotiating this contract. Because the old contract, and I'll stop in a minute, was one of property rights. The company owned us. We were property. And I know that's true because when they hired us, they called it talent acquisition. Well, when you acquire something, you purchase it. You don't rent it. You don't partner with it. You don't stop and say, who is this person? You acquire it. And so I think the days of employee as property is changing. I think it can be, we can make a dent in that. But we have to give up a lot of the things we thought were true. We have to give up the notion that change happens by starting at the top. So that's what I kind of want to say. Well, suppose we really were participants in reimagining what work is about and what the deal is. Because now that people go home, they don't want to go back. Unless they got 3 young kids, of course they want to go back. But I think all that's up for grabs. And I don't know anybody other than organization development commitments a better shot of reimagining what a work-life community world would look like. So that's just kind of thoughts.
Well, where would that imagining begin?
Where would it begin? It begins in our relationship. I can't imagine an alternative future on my own. And as an OD person, I don't have to imagine that future. I just have to engage you and me and all of us in saying, if we wanted to create a future distinct from the past, what would it look like? And all I got to do is look around and see what's happened in the last 3 months. People are working at home. Nobody's had any performance reviews. People have put the competency model in the bottom drawer. The way we hold town meetings is silly, where the top speaks and the bottom listens and asks questions. Sometimes they pass them in. God forbid, they should ask a spontaneous. So
they filter them, they screen the questions.
I know they screen the questions. It's all about control. That's what you do with property. It's property management. And so OD says, no, these are human beings. It's not property. So I think it begins with a conversation about who we are connected with, wherever we are. Enough to say, would you be interested in a conversation about creating a future distinct from the past?
I know from your writings that you advocate one of the best, if not the best place for good conversation is the group. So I want you to talk about why the group.
Because we live in the myth of the individual. We have funny language. Oh yeah, I'm a self-made person. We tell our children, if you work hard and behave, you can grow up to be president of the United States. And so we're so individualistic. I go to school, and the first day of first grade, they told me, Peter, you're no longer a playmate, you're a competitor.
Really?
You're on your own.
Peter,
pardon?
That's true?
Well, they put the normal curve. They say, okay, welcome to class.
Okay,
some of you going to get A's, some of you going to get F's. Okay. You think if I get all A's, I get in trouble.
I get what you're saying.
And all I want to do is please. So that's so individualistic. You can't, the world doesn't shift by heroes. It's just not a heroic process. So if you really want to change something, we need each other. We need the collective. We need the community. We don't have language for it. We're still so individualized. We still, in some companies, rank everybody from one top to bottom. We're so afraid to evaluate by how a team or a group does. It terrifies us because we lose control of people when they. Why are we so afraid of people in the streets? because we've lost control of them. We want people to be single file, no talking. And so anything radical, anything imaginative has to be a collective effort. And we have to bring strangers into that conversation. You know, the world, the culture, the countries, our leaders are now terrified of the stranger. So we've got to do something about that. Now, the stranger may be somebody from marketing. It may not be somebody from Northern Africa. I don't know. But it has to be collective. And we have the communal methodology. We know how to convene. Line managers don't know how to convene. They call meetings. And they call meetings where the outcome is predictable. They say, let's develop a blueprint. Or let's start a meeting with a PowerPoint, which means 6 weeks ago, I decided what I wanted to say right now. That's what PowerPoint means. You don't have to have a thought in the moment. So we can redo all these artifacts, and we do. But now it becomes a way of doing business. It's not an intervention.
I'm a bit skeptical of the OD practitioner being the sole facilitator of group processes. I'm of the opinion that we need to develop, especially leaders, to be able to do some of this group work. So let me hear your reaction to what I just said.
I've had a training business based on the flawless consulting stuff for 40 years. And we've taught consulting skills, all that stuff. Not anymore. We'll still do that. But now we need to teach leaders exactly what you said, right? Yes. How to facilitate, how to convene. The business schools need to teach the art of hosting. They need to teach open space methodology. They need to teach World Cafe. They need to teach the 6 conversations. That's the core curriculum for leaders of the future. We have to deconstruct leadership and pull away all the heroic, all the vision, all the role model, all the parent, all the notion you're going to develop your people. Oh, I love my people. I grow people. Really? You're a gardener of human beings? When did God give you that right? All that has to be deconstructed with exactly what you said. Let's teach leaders to know everything we know about bringing people together. And then we become a guest. We don't become the host, but the leader becomes the host.
Well, I was so inspired when I read probably my favorite article, Leadership and the Small Group. Okay, that's your article. I absolutely love all of what you're saying in that article about the leader's responsibility to convene conversation, good conversation, and not letting us off the hook, nor allowing leaders to get off the hook if we begin to put share the responsibility. We work ourselves out of a job, which is one of the teachings when I first got into OD.
Well, we won't be out of a job. We just won't be in front of the room.
We won't be in front of the room, and I guarantee we'll get back, because if we begin to leave our magic with them, they will want more of that.
Yeah, it's not. And I broke people into small groups for years. My daughter called me from college once. She said, "Dad, this guy does. None of our kids know what we do for a living." Okay, and so she said, "This guy does what you do." I said, "What?" "He broke us into small groups." I thought, wow, she finally understands me. Then I realized 30 years later that all transformation occurs in a small group. It is the means of transformation. Margaret Mead knew that.
Kurt Lewin knew that.
He knew that. He understood that. He gave birth to us.
Yes.
And the way how he learned it? Because the government hired him, because during the Second World War, everybody wanted filet mignon. And they said, "No, you can't have it. We're sending it to the soldiers. You're going to eat liver. You're going to eat tongue. You're going to eat innards." Okay. And they pitched the hell out of secondary meats. Nobody ate them. And they said to Kurt Lewin, who invented social psychology, he said, what can you do about this? He says, I'll tell you. So he broke people into small groups all over the country and had to talk about how much they hated all these secondary meats. And once they talked about how much they hated it, they started eating them.
So what do you think happened there?
I think when people are in a circle and know they're not alone, they'll do anything. They'll take any risk. They'll create an alternative future. It's just that the world we've participating in is so deeply isolating that on my own, I don't have a chance. I don't have a chance to give up my addiction. I don't have a chance to create an alternative future. I can't even raise a child on my own. And so this is a real opportunity to say the small group is transformation. Now, you have to structure it. Otherwise, people will just do chit chat. And so we know how to do that, but we can teach. If we can understand it, it can't be that complicated.
It is not, but we have to teach. We have to teach what we do so that others can begin to doing that.
And we teach it in leadership schools in business. We don't teach it in OD and MSOD and AUNTL. That's nice, luxurious. God bless the classroom. But basically, and we teach them what's a powerful question. Well, the powerful question is one that makes you nervous as hell. Mm-hmm. How do you create belonging? Well, get people nervous. Mm-hmm. Give them questions that they don't know what the hell you're talking about. And have them lean into each other and have them agree not to be helpful. There's nothing more colonial than help. And so we need to help all of us realize that help is never helpful. Get back to it. People say, Peter, would you give me some advice? And I always say, sure, as long as you follow it. And they say, well, that's not what I had in mind. And the answer is no. Tell me what your life is like. Mm-hmm. And so we know we can teach once we decide that that's what we're here for, is to help people of all responsibilities know that the number one job is to bring people together to talk about what kind of future, what's true. All of us have our own methodology. But without that, close the classroom.
You're saying a little bit more to you're saying, I'm hearing, provide an experience for people.
That's everything.
Yes, provide an experience.
We know how to design experiences. That's the only way people learn. Stanford studied that. All learning is social. I used to work with people teaching computer sciences when it was early and everybody was terrified. And then Nancy McMorrow was a friend of mine. I said, what are you doing? She says, I'm running classes on computers. This is 30 years ago. And so how do you do that? Well, I kind of go over the material with them. I said, how's it going? She said, they're not learning anything. I said, why don't you begin by asking how they feel about being in that class? Mm-hmm. And everybody was scared shitless. How do you feel about this computer? I'm terrified. I don't know anything about it. As soon as they talked about how afraid they were, as soon as they knew they weren't alone in that class, they learned everything they had twice as fast. We know this, we just haven't been able to give our lives to it. I have a friend who's a math teacher. And I said, how do you teach math? She says, I have my students fall in love with each other in the presence of a math teacher. So we need people that work in a place to fall in love with each other. They don't have to like each other. I don't need to like my neighbors to need them in the presence of somebody who convenes them that we used to call leaders. So it's now is the time. Because I know there's something unbalanced. There's some crisis we're in.
So I've heard you say there's the need for diversity, however you define it, for purposes of this conversation. The small group. I've heard you talk about delivering experience. And I've heard you talk about powerful questions. I want you to say more about the significance of the questions we ask.
Let me just tag, the word diversity has become too small.
Mm-hmm.
What we need is the stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And that, wherever that is, because without the stranger, I'll never be surprised. So we don't do diversity for the sake of justice. If we want justice, let's do economic equality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how many do we have in the room? But it's the stranger that I need. And so that's, the question is what will bring us together and what keeps us apart. Answers keep me apart, keep us apart. What are we arguing about? There's nothing to argue about. A friend of mine, Peter Kestenbaum, he said, Peter, he'd tell a group, I'm warning you now, if you argue with me, I'm going to take your side.
Okay.
It changed my life. Oh my God, there's nothing to argue about. Now, if you like to go around a little, got nothing else to do, and you think your opinions matter, well, go argue. So the questions bring us together, and the questions have to be ambiguous and personal. What's the crossroads you're at this stage of your life? Well, what's that got to do with hedge funds? Everything. What's that got to do with the workplace? What's that got to do with running a restaurant? What's the cross? Because if you answer that question, you show up as a person who has a choice. The price we paid for the old contract was I gave choice away. I asked my boss, well, what do you have in mind for me? That's the saddest question in the world. Why would I ask anybody what they have in mind for me? And then we call it development. And so every question confronts people with their freedom. Powerful question. What doubts do you have? What's the resentment you have that nobody knows about? What's that got to do with running a restaurant? Everything. Because until you put that into words around people that you care about, that resentment owns you. And you see people in the workplace, things happened 10 years ago. I'll never trust those people. Why not? Well, in 2003, well, that's because they've held on to resentment. So all of these things are healing, connecting. And it doesn't matter if people want them. I never ask people, what do you expect? Because they're too low. I don't want to worship a small God any longer. I don't want to know what top management thinks. People used to say, Peter, well, wouldn't you like to come and work with top management? And I always say, why would I do that? They're slow learners. They're isolated. The expectations that people have of them are dehumanizing to top management. And so you just kind of say, well, let's have a conversation where we reclaim choice in the matter. We treat people as if they're cause, not affecting. When people complain to me about their boss, I always say, well, why are you creating a boss in that form? Children, if you have children, you know they created you. So this is the inversion that OD understands.
I do.
You put your hand against your heart for some reason.
Because I'm thinking when you talked about ownership earlier, I had a reaction being an African-American woman. When you talk about finding your voice and speaking your voice, it is not easy, or it's for everyone to do that. So I need you to respond to the lack of safety that needs to be considered when we're finding our voice in the presence of power and authority.
Well, if power and authority shows up as host,
okay,
as convener,
okay,
and they leave their little power and authority outside the room, and I know I'm not alone, I will find that's the only conditions under which I find my voice, is because I know I'm not alone, I'm not crazy. All right. And there's nothing wrong with me. So the real task of leadership is not to do power and authority. When people say, well, I can't talk in front of my boss, so I say, why are you choosing to live a life like that? All it tells me is they're not, the safety I find is in my neighbors. I find safety in you, Marianne. Okay, I don't expect to find safety in parental figures. They don't have any power over me. They can't fire us all. They can only fire us if we're at each other and compete with each other. And I don't know, it takes your life to find your voice, but you don't have a chance without peers, without trust, without strangers, without realizing that this institution is ours to create. That's system thinking. It's ours to create.
You have moved me to get in touch with the power of gangs, the power of flash mobs, the power that was revealed in some of the early studies of Kurt Lewin, where he had mothers who couldn't afford to buy milk products for their children come together as a group. So I'm hearing now we're saying the group is a place where we can find experience, there is social connection and less isolation. We find that we are not alone, but there's power in the group.
There is, and Western culture is terrified of that. They call it communism. Okay, if they say collaboration, oh, that's what they did during the Second World War. So we have to. An OD has a way of framing it, because everybody's afraid of a gang. Well, we call people gangs as an expression of racism, as an expression of elitism, as an expression that we call, as soon as you call somebody poor, you declare them broken. All of our language about the collective and the neighborhood is a form of colonialism. I don't use or buy any of it. I don't believe in gangs. I think they're groups of people. Are they doing things wrong? Yeah, but there's gangs in leadership positions also. It's called an executive committee. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to just take some of this language.
Yeah, reframe it,
let it go,
re-language it, what we say.
And the language is what's transformation. Your questions to me are an invitation for me to reimagine my own life. I'm acting like I have an answer, but that's just, we got to do something together. But the questions, our capacity to reflect with each other, especially about things that have no answers. Every time you do one of these videos, they say, would you make sure you're specific and give people the 5 steps? Why would I disrespect you like that? Why would Kurt Lewin says there's nothing so practical as a good theory. And that's, God, I heard that. I felt I could go on living. That's all I cared about was a good theory. I've never done anything practical.
I haven't either. I'm trying to get there. I have to work hard at being very practical. I really do.
I know. I believe in the concrete. I believe in the moment. Mm-hmm. What you and I know, Marianne, is when we're in a room, we know what to do. Okay? We know what to do with it. And that's what the world needs to learn also. Is no matter what's in the room, that's the beauty of our lives now, is we can go into a room and not know what the hell we're going to do till we get there.
I can walk into a room, and if I'm grounded, I know what to do, Peter. It's not brag, it's just fact that I know how to do that. However, I am concerned about OD in that regard. I love that we are looking at systems more holistically. The individual work we do with coaching, the conflict management, we could do a little bit more on that. We do the group, and now we're moving to large group interventions. But we run the risk of having the small groups that are formed as part of the large group interventions be nothing but groups where we have a timekeeper, someone to take notes, and we're not attending to people's experience there.
This is the nature of our participation in colonialism, in empire. This is our harking back to Pharaoh and the Israelites in the Old Testament. We're as attracted by patriarchy and being close to power as anybody. In fact, when the Jews left and went into the wilderness, first thing they wanted to do is go back to Egypt. They said, "Oh my God, there's no food out here. There's nobody serving. What is this? Let's go back. At least Pharaoh fed us." Our professions, there's no large system change without the small group. You don't get a large system in the room, and if they don't fall in love with each other in small groups, you're playing with yourself. You're looking smart is what you're doing. You're looking smart.
And putting them in small groups is not small group experience.
It's not. It's saying that until people overcome their isolation, until they know there's nothing wrong with them, until they know there's a space for them to either find their way. And it's just that who you put in the groups makes a difference. Like-mindedness is the handmaiden of colonialism.
Yes.
I hate like-mindedness, partly because it works. Every time I buy something online, which I try not to, they say, "Oh, other people like you have bought this." And I look down and say, "Yeah, it's pretty cool." So diversity, the stranger, without a group of strangers sitting down and talking about the future, there is no future. And we have to do this all the time. You go into a room and say, "Okay, I want to break into small groups, go with people you know the least." And I don't care if it's 500 people. I've done it with 4,000 people, or you do it with 20 people. And somebody will always say, "I'm fine." Middle-aged white male learning position, "I'm fine." And I go and I tell them, "No, you're not fine. You got to leave that person you came with." And I know if they don't, they'll never be surprised. And so all of these little things that we thought were facilitation devices change the world. But that's what that's where you can walk into a room, and in 5 or 6 minutes, you'll know what to do next. And allows us to be extremely venturesome, because I know how to recover. I'm kind of sarcastic, I'm glib, I talk too much. I don't worry about that, because I know how to recover. When I see something going wrong, I say, "Whoops, sorry about that." And so it's so easy. And if the session's not going well, I know what to do. Could you break into small groups and tell me why this session isn't going well? Now, that never happens. Usually I talk louder. If it's not going well, I say, maybe they don't understand. So that's our collusion with patriarchy.
Let's stay with patriarchy. And I want to ask you about you. Tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm describing you wrong. White, male, heterosexual. You identify with the gender with which you were born. Upper class. What do you do with all that privilege? How have you learned to manage all your privilege?
Well, the first thing you do is there's two things. One is privilege. One is I get a lot of heat. Why should I listen to an old white man? And so I don't have an answer to that. Privilege is different. I got lucky. I won the lottery. And so I've given my life to economic, social, relational justice. And I don't, the worst thing you can do with privilege is pretend you don't have it. I don't know why. I grew up broke. I was terrified. I had to borrow money for dinner, for God's sake. And so for some reason, I ended up making money, partly because I I didn't care that much. You know, I've had a business for 40 years and never hired a lawyer. People take shit all the time. So, but for some reason, I think, you know, I feel grateful for the privilege, and then it guides everything I do. It doesn't change anything. I'm still a white male. I still have been bred in me. I'm a Jew. I grew up during the Second World War. But that doesn't change anything. It's just that the last 10 years, all I've cared about is economic equality. All my money, all my effort, all my blah, blah. Because nobody wants to talk about the money.
Nobody wants to talk about the money.
They talk about, oh, isn't it nice, you know, well, how many years of schooling have you had? As soon as you ask a person like that question, you call them stupid. So I've kind of worked on the language of equality. You know, I don't know. None of it explains anything. And, you know, I think gratitude is the only emotionally. I'm just grateful. I'm grateful during this crisis. I'm a target. I'm old and I got respiratory problems. I've been able to stay home for 4 months. But I get that all the time. I don't know what to say. What should I say when people say, why should I listen to an old white man? An old well-off white man, an old well-off white man Jew. Why should I listen to him? Help me, man. I don't know what to say.
I asked you about how do you use or what do you do with your privilege? Your answer was enough. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I truly wanted to know, what do you do with it?
You know, exactly.
Yeah. And I thought about asking, what is your guidance to others who hold similar categories as you do? And then I thought maybe I'll ask Peter, how do you challenge leaders who really reside in some of the categories where you reside? How do you challenge them?
I try to get beneath the story around them about who they are. I don't believe it's who they are. Mm-hmm. I ask them, what do you really care about? I'm not interested in anybody's opinion. Mm-hmm. Nobody's opinion. I don't go to meetings and let's everybody go around and express their voices, tell me what you came for. Half the community meetings I go to, people stand up and make speeches, and I say, and I don't care what status they are. I say, have you given that speech before? Oh, yeah. I said, well, why would you do that? Why are you wasting your time? And so I'm always saying, so what matters to you? I don't know what matters to me. Well, if you did know what mattered to you, because at the level of our humanity, we'll come together. And so what OD, in my mind, is always trying to do is help people connect around their humanity. And me, privileged, white, male Jew, that's not my story. It's got nothing to do with who I am. And I've spent my life trying to reconstruct a narrative about who I am. It has some meaning and open up a future for me. I'm not done yet for some reason. And so I learned that from tea groups, for God's sake. Because when I ran tea groups, I was then a young, privileged white male Jew, okay? And people would get mad at me. I'd say, okay, we're going to be together for 5 days. What we learn is from what happens in this circle. Mm-hmm. And then I keep my mouth shut. And what kind of leadership is, people got mad at me. I can remember being up against a wall with 22 angry middle managers from Exxon yelling at me. Mm-hmm. And therapy helped me, because the healing doesn't begin until the resistance gets expressed.
Oh, you sound gestalt there.
Amen, sister. I learned that from Claire and Mike Riker. And so I learned that their anger has nothing to do with who I am. Yeah. And so people give me a hard time about whatever. I say, thank you. What do you mean, thank you? I don't know. Thank you. And then I don't take it personally. Now, my home life, forget it. But in the world, if people don't learn that, then they'll live a cautious life. So people get mad at me. I just say, good point. You're really mad at me, aren't you?
Well, you have talked about what people project onto you. You've written a lot about projections. Do you want to say something about projections?
Well, it's so powerful and so elusive. Like part of the where I wrote about it most was the idea of resistance. What do you do when clients and people give you a hard time? And what you do is you ask them, what are you really upset about? You don't deal with the content of what the world throws at you. It's not about you. Get off it. People's response to me, they don't even know who I am. And more so when I'm successful. Here comes Peter. He's giving a keynote address. Isn't that nice? They don't know who I am. People, oh, that was great, Peter. God, I loved your talk. I don't take that any more personally than I do if they give me a hard time. It's got nothing to do with who I am. It's what I happen to do. I happen to do that because, I don't know, halfway through my life, I realized I had a brain for some reason. I thought I just had a mouth for the first 35 years of my life. And I got by on my mouth. And I wrote a book and something. But even the praise, even the love is projection. Once in a while, you're with somebody like you who sees who you are. And they just weep and you thank God for them.
Oh, Peter.
Everything else is projection.
Before you came on the call, had you thought about some things you wanted to say and you have not said them yet?
No, I did think about some things. I'm trying to make sense of this world, but I wrote them down, which is nice because now I don't have to worry about them. I know where they are.
It's the same. I have my notes. So why don't we look at, I'm interested in some of the things on your list, if you have not already mentioned them. And I enjoy hearing you speak about those.
One of my flaws is trying to make sense of things.
Flawless.
Pardon?
Flawless consulting.
Every book. I just write a book to get the damn ideas out of my brain so I can be empty for a moment. But I did a Mars leadership thing, and at the end, I said to a guy, God, this group was amazing. This is one of the best sessions I've ever done. I wonder why. And he looked at me and he said, Peter, can't you just enjoy the experience without having to analyze? And I thought about that. I thought that was a beautiful moment, that he cared enough about me to say that. And the answer is no. So I try to make sense of things. My thinking was, well, what's changing? What's the social contract we had? And it was a property contract. It was an acquisition. So I could say more about it, but wouldn't make it any clearer. And what's the contract we're looking for? We're looking for a contract of intimacy, of connection, deep connection for good cause. And we're calling that a business meeting. We're calling that organization development. Connection isn't the only point, but without it, nothing occurs in the room. And so the other things I thought, well, what are our tools? Well, we have all these tools of connecting. Coaching, to me, I'd let go of coaching. Coaching treats the individual leader. Most of it's for executive. Let it go. They can get healing any place they want. I give them 50 therapists they can go to, but don't make that an intervention. All right, groups, yes. Open space, what did you come here for? People's intentions, what's the invitation look like? We know how to make an invitation. We know how to confront people with it. I did it in India, and everybody's sitting there like this. I said, how many of you were here by choice? 80 people knew. They all like this. I said, how many of you were sent? they came alive. I realized they loved their own slavery. They said, you guys are excited about the fact you didn't. Now, we're going to take a break in 10 minutes. If you come back, you chose to come back. We know how to do that. We know how to confront people with their choice kindly. If I'm angry, I go to the bathroom. I'm no use to anybody. And I get angry and things irritate me. That's my projection. I project onto all kinds of people a darkness they don't deserve. And so let go of the anger, save it for night. And so we know all of these things. We know how to confront people with their freedom, with eye contact and compassion. And I'll ask anybody anything 3 times. Why does that really bother you? How do you feel about working with me in this work? How do you feel about being in this room? I'm fine. I know you're fine. What doubts do you have about being with me in this moment? Oh, I don't have any doubts. I heard all about you. And I say, if you had any doubts, what would they be? So you give everybody 3 shots. You're going deeper. And then if you get nothing, let go. Something else. But we need to do that collect in a group. And we need to go into that room with a rough idea of what our intention is. But we know we're there to help people get connected, because the patriarchy, colonialism, empire, Pharaoh has convinced me that there's something wrong with me and that I'm alone and I'm crazy. And if I don't get past those 3 things, I don't have a shot. And as soon as you call somebody poor or low income, you accuse them of madness, stupidity, brokenness. So our work is to do something about that. Now you say, is it just for the sake of relationship? No, but to create a structure by strangers it'll become an estranging structure. I never argue against hierarchy or bosses. We've got to be some management and order in the world. But we've taken that to be true about us. And anyway. How are you? What's striking you about this conversation?
Well, I like this idea of stranger. I've experienced touching moments with you. Really, when you talked about who you are, that's what I took away from what you said.
Mm-hmm.
I love that we meet around the whole notion of the group as probably the most powerful social structure for transformation. It's not the only one, but we have to make use of the group, because we get colossal returns when we do that. And knowing how to mine the gold of the group is the work of OD going forward, especially if we're bringing strangers together.
And helping groups mine gold from each other. It always blows me away. You put strangers in a small group and give them 12 minutes. And at the end of 12 minutes, you say, how did that go? And they say, God, I felt so alone. And in 12 minutes, I've said things to these people I haven't said to anybody else in my life. I don't feel so alone. And I don't feel so crazy. And maybe I'm flawed, but so what? And that's what's like being with you, really.
Oh, I thank you. I love when I hear someone in a group say, I did something I've never done before. The OD practitioner must know that that's the beginning of transformation. We miss little things like that. When I say I've never done that before, wow, we're making progress.
Beautiful. It proves the existence of God.
Yes.
You want evidence? That's it.
Well, is there anything else?
There's everything else, but this is a lot. This is enough. The other thing I thought about was this is the end of a consumer world also.
Mm-hmm.
And we've turned each other into commodities. What do I get from you? What's in it for me? All those conversations are obsolete. Quid pro quo, all that stuff we should never participate in again. And I feel that we're citizens now. And I think as OD people, our consciousness is as much in question as any hard line manager I have ever been with. The notion that I have a little bit more together. No, I don't have. The only thing unique about us is what we pay attention to. And if I'm not surprised, what am I doing? As a profession, if we're not surprised, what are we doing? I think you said that. And the best educators, know how to design experiences that reach even us. There's no greater defense against the world than sophistication.
I will tell you one of the self-discoveries is that over time, as I have worked in the field of OD and as a behavioral scientist, I found myself, even though I bragged before, I'm a theorist, I find myself realizing that I have grown to be in touch with myself and feel myself and get emotional and own my emotions in a way that continues to liberate me. And I know it comes from the work I've done, all of the T group technology, my work at Gestalt, all of those things. And I think they really support me being supportive of other people.
And it's the way you've done the work you've done, because the work itself is no assurance of my ever finding myself. And so you would have found that if you'd studied accounting.
I did study accounting.
So did I. So did I. I wanted a job, so I studied finance.
Oh gosh, I went to school in math, and then I changed to accounting, and then I got a business degree, and that's oh no!
I studied engineering and finance, and engineering I let go of that, but I majored in finance because I was desperate, and thank God I like it. That's fun, but I think the thing I would say again is what you're doing is we're reconstructing leadership.
Yes.
Changing our mind what constitutes leadership. And hopefully not participate in that form of leadership that had to do with property rights and control. And I'm scared in the protest conversation that it will get co-opted by traditional leadership. What we need is another diversity executive. That terrifies. Says that the future can be purchased by hiring the right professional. In my work from here on in design learning is to say, how do we help bring organizations and their neighborhood communities together? Get outside those walls. And now that people are at home, it's going to be easy. All they have to do is go for a walk. Anyway, You're just delightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I had wanted for you to talk just a little bit about, is it Elements, the hip hop organization?
Well, yeah, I'm happy to. So part of my freedom is understanding what I'm good at.
Okay.
So what I learned with John McKnight in my community work is the gifts conversation is the one that's never held. And if you want to create an alternative future for somebody, you have to help them find out what they're good at. Mm-hmm. So after we had disturbances and uprising in Cincinnati in 2001, a group got together and they were going to do Cop Watch, which is a total waste of time. And finally they said, no, let's organize urban youth. And so I was in that conversation. And I said, why don't we ask them what they love to do? We're not going to ask them how many years of schooling. Have you been to jail? If you're Black and you haven't been to jail, I don't know what the hell you've been doing, okay? Or arrested or whatever it is. So we don't ask them any questions that would carry the notion that they're alive. And we say, what do you love to do? Well, urban youth love hip hop. Really? Yeah. What do you mean by that? Oh, I love to lay down beats. I love to dance. I love to sing. I love to write. I love to do video. I like graffiti. Okay, if I paint something and don't have to run from the cops, I haven't done anything useful for that evening. Mm-hmm. And so we started a center for hip hop and respect in 2017 years ago. And we invited youth in, raised a little money, and organized and said, you come here, it's not a rec center. You're not going to play ball. You're going to take classes, studio, hip hop, graffiti. April Rain is a master DJ. So you come in and learn all these forms of hip hop. And in learning hip hop, they got off the street. We never said a thing about the street. We just said, what do you love to do? Well, you've got a class of 3, you better be there. Okay. And then we had them manage it. You know, it's all little, and it was for the age group of 14 to 24. That's the Blacks everybody's terrified of. Everybody loves cute little Black kids. Mm-hmm. Once they turn 14 and 18 and 21, they scare the shit out of us. Mm-hmm. Even the guy who owns the Mavericks crosses the street when they come down. You know? And so we said that's what we're aiming at, 14 to 24. And, you know, the people who really did the work were amazing because they could bridge these youth and make them feel safe and seen and at home. And they could bridge into the larger community that was looking for some way to support. So, you know, 17 years, it's still peanuts. And I'd say of all the things I participated in, I feel best about that. It's really, I don't know. Obviously, I over-answered your question. I'm sorry.
No.
I wish the world operated that way. You know, take them out of school. Let's run some. We have 16 failing schools in Cincinnati. Well, they're all low-income places. It's got nothing to do with pedagogy or teachers or military leaders or better superintendents. So that was, I don't know. And I want to do the same thing in workplace. Have leaders focus on what people are good at. This is what OD knows. We don't go around doing. Sometimes we do gap analyses, but God will forgive us for that. You know, where are you now? Where do you want to be? And how are you going to close the gap? But I think part of the convening part of OD is to confront people with their gifts.
I think that might be a good place.
We're done.
Yes. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Marianne. You are, I can't wait to do something you want to do.
On behalf of everyone, thank you so much, Peter and Marianne, for allowing us to eavesdrop that conversation, which is filled with such wisdom and guidance. And I was particularly struck by the concept of stranger that, Peter, you use, and their importance to our lives and growth. I'm grateful for both of you taking the time to share this discussion. If you'd like to contact Peter and Marianne to continue this conversation, all the information are at the end of this video. So a big thank you to you again, Peter, and thank you, Marianne, for curating this conversation. And everyone, have a good day.